Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmage, and here with me is our maternity housing specialist, Valerie Harkins. And we also have Vicki Krnac, who is the executive director of Hannah's Home, which is located in Ohio. And Valerie puts together some really great resources on maternity housing for both new and established homes. And you can be the first to hear about those updates by subscribing to the Heart and Home newsletter. It's a monthly e-newsletter. It'll go straight to your inbox. And to subscribe to that, visit heartbeatservices.org. And I'll also include a link below in the show notes where you can subscribe to that directly. So please check out the Heart and Home e-newsletter. So Valerie and Vicki, welcome. It's great to have you here. And let's talk about capital and construction for building apartment complexes for maternity housing.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I really appreciate it. So just kind of launching into this discussion here, I'm so excited to have Vicki with us. And thank you, Vicki, for joining us. You are allowing me to publicly pick your brain about not only a big project, but it was your first rodeo of this particular type of project. So kudos to you for some vulnerability in that, right? Because we all know how large projects can be. A lot of fun and a little bit unexpected twists and turns along the way. So Vicki, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and good morning.
I hear this subject daily from homes that are looking towards planning in the midst of a capital campaign. All systems go towards building apartment complexes or expanding their current maternity home model to include apartment complexes. And so it's certainly not just you, but what I've noticed is you are ahead of the race. I had the privilege of keeping up from the background of when this idea came about and the story of how the funding came about and when you decided y'all were going to hit go. And then the other day you announcing your ribbon cutting ceremony. Mm-hmm. So I really want to hear the story. I think that's really the questions that I want to ask so that other homes can hear, okay, how did it go? You know, we had the first person that kind of the brave home that went first. So how did that go? So could you just start with telling us about what you built, what's going on and what led you to decide to do that?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I never thought about it as being the first or kind of pioneering that way. You know, I just felt, I guess I just didn't realize that part of it, but I guess it's a good spot to be in. So I think I would say back about, I've been doing this for 8 years. And, I think we just had as an organization a vision of a few things, and like including a daycare and, some extended kind of housing aftercare, with not a lot of specifics on what that would look like. And then as we walked through our program with, the women, you just see the needs arise, the needs for them to be able to be in the home longer, and take advantage of, the support system that we offer, and I could go on and on and on about the reasons why, we were struggling to get them affordable housing. At some point, they kind of came to the end of the program and they were ready to leave. However, they weren't ready to be quite independent. And so we really felt the need to develop our program into a phase 1 and phase 2, kind of that pregnancy, newborn phase, and then, a more late infant toddler phase, before, as far as parenting is concerned, and intermixing those moms in the home of those two phases doesn't always go smoothly, so there were just a lot of reasons as to why, and it would take me a long time to pinpoint them all, but it was really staying connected to our alumni moms and really hearing the voices from them, that pushed us forward to figure out what could we do? And so I'm just kind of the type of person that I look around me to look for the people and the resources that God has put in front of me, to lead me to what my next steps are. And we're blessed with a really large home. It's 16,000 square feet. And so I just started, what can we do now? What can we do right now? Yes, we have a long-term vision, but what can we work towards right now? And I started envisioning some of the space in our current home to be utilized in a different way. And that's actually what we did. I toured my board president. I took her in the upstairs of the home and I said, could you envision this space that really housed a lot of donations, and a lot of hobby space, which those are important things, of course, but could you envision this into 4 apartments? That would be a phase 2, a step down in accountability and support, but not fully independent. And she right away, she was like, absolutely. So that's where we started. We just got the rest of we communicated the vision to the rest of the board. They loved it. That's how it got in motion. So does that answer your first question?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It leaves me wondering, okay, so I'm following along in my mind and we hear about your organization. We've got the layout, you have the need for the women with what's going on, and you've got this vision and you're walking them through, but there's a pretty significant jump between having the vision and then actual construction and ribbon cutting. What did it look like trying to even formulate a plan, and how did you get started?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm almost a little bit embarrassed to be honest about it, because I think what I would do next is very different. I learned a lot about planning and things like that. So as we move into our next part of the vision, the planning for that is going to be much more detailed and specific. But having never gone through a project like this, we learned a lot, and I think it started with the funding, but I can see God's hand in it before we got to each step, which is a beautiful testimony to him. So I just feel like our vision to actually get those apartments accomplished was much farther out than what God's timing was, so I think we put it about, we never really put a time limit on it, but it was at least 5 to 10 years away, knowing like we need to establish a capital campaign, so our thoughts were much farther out. And to be honest, I won a nonprofit Shark Tank event, and I just proposed the apartment project. We had no plan. We had no skeleton kind of architectural design of the apartments. We didn't even know if the city would allow us to have this done on the property. But I proposed this as a project, so I'm not recommending you do that, but that's just kind of the way it happened. That's what I presented on the Shark Tank event, was this apartment project. We won. It gave us such exposure that we had raised, by the end of the weekend after that event, we had raised $130,000 for the project. So it really thrust us forward and it was a huge affirmation that, God wants this, he wants it now, and this is what we're doing. And so, that's when we started we interviewed construction companies, and we hired a construction company. They really took it from there as far as the architectural and the zoning with this city and things like that. And never having run through a capital campaign, I just, I would just bring people in and share the vision and walk them through the space and say, this is what we want. This is what we need. This is what we're doing. God sent the donors, things like that. So we were able to really charge part of it funded before we even did a groundbreaking ceremony. So
So that's exciting. And how fun is that story that you just kind of said, let me shoot my shot with Shark Tank and let's just see. And the Lord said, yes.
For sure.
That's exciting. And I think an acknowledgement is due for your willingness, your vulnerability to even just try, right? I look at all the doors that opened from that. How exciting.
Yeah. So, I would say we had a vision, we had, what we were hoping for. However, being very open to how is this going to get done? What is this going to look like? Those kind of things. And, I think at the end of the day, just taking the very next step was all that we were asked, at every given point in time.
Okay. So question for you. Sure. What was the budget that you started out with, like your initial expectation? And then at the end, what was the realistic cost for this project?
Yeah. So when I found out that I was going to be on Shark Tank, it kind of started everything in motion. We didn't know what the cost of the project was going to be. We hadn't done any of that. And so it kind of, I have a friend who went to school as an architect to be an architect, but she never followed through with that career path. And so she's like, hey, I could come in and just do a rough estimate on what it might look like and what it might cost. And so she came up with a $200,000 figure, and it proved to be pretty accurate. So that's what we used for the Shark Tank event. But from that, we were able to refine it, and it ended up, once the construction company did all of that, it was about 240, and we ended up just under 300,000 actually that the project cost.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, and I will admit that is much less than I was expecting you to say. Yes, I'm pretty surprised by that. Would you say that was like pretty standard, or were y'all trying to be as frugal as you can be?
Well, the space is beautiful. I'm extremely happy with how we ended up with everything. So we renovated space that we already had. So, it wasn't like we were doing a brand new construction. Okay. That is, we have vision, and we have 6 acres of land. So that is our phase 3 is new construction. But, so if we were going to have full apartments that have a kitchen and a bathroom in them, then we would have only been able to get 2.5, let's say, in the space that we have. But because we decided to go with a shared kitchen and a shared bathroom, we were able to get 4 apartments, they're kind of efficiency apartments. So they have a living room and a bedroom, but they will share a kitchen still and share a bathroom. But it's its own space, completely different than our phase 1 floor, and it's going to operate different. And so where phase 1, they're very heavy in community, they cook and eat, together, clean up together, those kind of things. The focus will be on their individual families. And so they won't be sharing meals. They will be responsible for cooking and for their own family and cleaning up, therefore, after themselves. So it's going to operate differently, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Vicki, were there any parts of this journey that were surprising to you?
I was actually surprised at how easy it was once we got the ball rolling. The construction we did interview several construction companies, and I truly believe we chose the right one. I have no complaints. They handled everything. Things that I wouldn't have thought of at first was just, random construction people, being on site, and how do we handle that and keep our home safe, and how, so we used a code system, any construction worker needed to know the construction code. So that was the whole thing was an experience, but it was a very pleasant, good experience. So.
Any recommendations for homes that are planning to expand and build some apartments?
Recommendations.
Yeah, if you did it again, would you do anything different?
Well, as we're clearly seeing, the Lord moving us right away into developing phase 3, I want to take the things that I have and be more strategic in planning. What do we, planning the spaces, and what are we trying to accomplish for the women, and making sure that their spaces are designed for what we're hoping to help them with at that time. Not that we didn't really do that. I just want to be more intentional, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense to me. Well, the last little segment here that I will pick your brain about is, I would imagine that doing this, although exciting, surely must have been a whirlwind, must have been stressful at some points of that journey. How did you manage that pressure, or the responsibility of it all, maybe the emotional drain of it, and just the stress? How did you manage that as an executive director while still operating, your current ministry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my board I have a very supportive board, and they were very purposeful that the construction was not my responsibility. And so we assigned a project manager, and it was one of my board members, and he really managed a lot of the communication between Hannah's Home and the construction project. Of course, I was involved just because I'm here every day, but it wasn't, they really did a great job of, they weren't coming to my office and knocking on the door saying, we need you to make this decision. That was really between the construction company and the project manager. And so that kept a huge amount of stress off of me. Probably my biggest stress was redesigning our program and having it prepared and ready, and rewriting those handbooks, because it's now changing phase 1. And to get phase 1 set up, that they are now walking into a phase 2. And then what are the guidelines and kind of the requirements for phase 2, so that was probably my biggest stress, and a lot of time and meetings with my direct care staff and things like that. But and the finances, I think I would say, in a construction project, you establish you contract and, agree upon a time for the payment schedule. And that's based on as the construction gets done, not a time frame. And so, the board had gone, even though we didn't have all of the funds completely raised for the project, the board approved us to go ahead at the beginning of the project. And because we did have enough money in the bank to cover it if we needed to. And the construction really happened way faster than what they had anticipated. That we were told it wouldn't be done until September. It was done in June, which made the payments come way earlier than what we thought. And so it really put us almost in a scarcity place. And even in that, like, the Lord provided people to come around me that I could, they would ask, like, how are the finances of the project doing? And I could say, actually, I need more, and they'd say, how much? And I'd be like, I need another $50,000. And okay, done, and they would send a check, so it was just all of it. We just saw God's hands in the whole thing. But one recommendation I would have if you're going to do a construction project or something like this is celebrate the moments. Don't miss the moments to celebrate moving forward. We did I threw together a small ribbon groundbreaking ceremony, even though we weren't officially breaking ground. We had shovels and took pictures and invited the city council, and then it was publicized, and we got a lot of great feedback from that. It got the community on board in the project, and people were watching the progress of the project, and it just really got people excited about it. And then, we really went all out. It was an event. My events committee planned a ribbon cutting ceremony. It was on the news. It was, it just was to celebrate the moments. That would be my, do what you can to make those a really big deal.
Well, thanks for that, Vicki. I appreciate it. So now I'm curious. I know that you said you have future plans. You have more land, more ideas. Any idea when your next construction project will be coming around?
Well, it's already started. So
wow.
And again, it's just following the Lord's lead. We have 6 acres of land, the vision. We've always articulated the vision. Even though it wasn't necessarily in writing, we've always said, we want daycare, we want cottages, we want a chapel, so we want women to be able to come into our home and, be with us, if that's a blessing to her and what she needs and wants, she could stay with us until that child goes into kindergarten, and she could go into her own home, or, it would definitely afford her own apartment, and those kind of things. So that's always been the vision. The daycare needs are, because of the space in the home that we utilize our daycare in right now, we can only have 7 children in. Well, right now we already are out. We've outgrown that if we have a full house, because we can have 10 women with 10 infants and 10 toddlers. So just communicating the need at the ribbon cutting ceremony, we shared the vision of phase 3, the need for the daycare. This is why we need cottages and in the back and things like that. So the next morning, somebody asked to have a meeting with me, and completely funded the daycare in that meeting, said it's paid for, just move forward. And so after I picked my jaw up off the ground, I sent my project manager, and my board an email, and, everybody just needed to catch their breath, but we've already had a meeting with the construction company and the architect. And so that is there, it's in motion already for phase 3. So.
Well, the Lord's guidance with your organization is obvious. We can see that he is leading the direction of Hannah's home and your steps, and that is exciting. But I think it's also encouraging. I think there's many homes, actually, I know that, many pregnancy help organizations that we work with regularly, that sometimes they have a vision and they're in the trenches, and it seems like the light at the end of the tunnel will never come. So it's exciting to hear how your process went, but also the Lord's faithfulness and favor to carry through his plans. And it reminds us that he will actually follow through on all of those promises that he made and on the plans that he has established. And so thank you for sharing that. We are praying for you and praying for you in your journey. And please pray for us as we are all in our journeys as well. We really appreciate you, Vicki.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Hey, thank you both for being here. I know that you had a busy week meeting with the Maternity Housing Coalition. Valerie, can you take just a second and talk about the coalition and how listeners, if they have a maternity home or are interested in starting one, can partner with you guys and get that support that they need when they feel like they're kind of facing these big projects ahead? What kind of resources do you have for people who either have a home or are looking to start a home?
Yeah, absolutely. Christine, thanks for mentioning that. I would have been sad to hang up and not not mention that. So Vicki is one of our council members. So we have a maternity housing coalition, and that coalition is guided by and led by a group of council members. And these are a group of organizations from all across the nations, from all kinds of programs, all kinds of backgrounds that serve women for a common mission and a common purpose. And together they provide support for our affiliates and for our members of our coalition. And so at Heartbeat, what we have available for those that want to start a home and are going, how in the world do I get started and how do I do this? We have available for all of our affiliates what we lovingly call the Maternity Home Helpline. And that just means that for our maternity homes that are affiliated with our coalition, they are able to schedule a cost-free monthly consultation with a housing specialist to work through the plans that they have for their organization and the unique circumstances that they have. We have our maternity home manual that is pretty inclusive for a lot of details that homes would need to get started. So that manual covers everything from incorporation to housing and program models, sample documents, and even considerations for if you are building a home or shopping for a home, property considerations for that. So if you don't already have the manual, I would certainly encourage you to do so. And then just ongoing as part of the coalition, we have podcasts such as these, monthly webinars, and a very active Facebook community that is dedicated to our maternity home affiliates, where our housing leaders are able to talk amongst themselves with one another and ask for help, for recommendations, or really just to learn from one another on an ongoing basis.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Valerie. And thank you, Vicki. And we appreciate all that the Housing Coalition does and all of the resources that you guys make available to those who are in housing ministry. So I hope our listeners are all subscribed to the podcast so that they can get updates on future episodes. And that includes not just maternity housing, but all topics affecting pregnancy help organizations worldwide. So with that, I wish everyone a great rest of your day. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.